Today we're sitting in front of our American flag in our American company shirt to talk about two very non-American guns. Let's get to work. Work here. Welcome back to Work the Trigger. Today we're going to be talking about the CZ Shadow 2 Optics Ready and the Sig P320 X5 Legion. Now, although I said that these weren't American guns, this one's not. This one, however, despite being Sig, is an American gun. I just liked it the other way. Anyway, these are two firearms specifically made for the competition sector. Both of these guns fit relatively well into both the production without the dot and the carry optics divisions with the dot. Both are optics ready models, and as far as price goes, for the Legion we're looking at around $1,000, and for the Shadow 2 here we're looking at around $1,500. So there is a $500 price difference between these two guns. Now, does that price difference get you anything? We'll cover that a little bit. Couple of stats to get out of the way. The Shadow 2 here comes with a 4.89-inch barrel, weighs in at 46.5 pounds. Pounds? No, it's ounces. It's definitely ounces. It's not pounds. It's not a 50-pound gun. It comes with three 17-round magazines. It is optics ready out of the box. However, you do have to have an adapter plate to be able to run an optic on it, and it does not come with those.
Batteries not included.
Those are available through multiple sources, and the cool part about this, in my opinion, is that this optics cut is the same optics cut that you'll find on CZ's P10 series. So, if you've got a plate that works on a CZ P10, it will also work on the Shadow 2. Now, the X5 here comes with a 5-inch barrel, again, three 17-round magazines, and weighs in at 43.5 pounds. Why? It's ounces. It's ounces. So, slightly lighter here on the X5. The optics system on the X5 is actually a direct mount system for the Delta Point Pro bases, which also covers what we've got here, the Romeo 1 Pro. But you can find aftermarket plate conversion systems from companies like C&H. From there, you can convert them to pretty much any of the standard footprints. I do have an RMR plate, and I did run a Holosun 507 on the top of this for quite a while. The plate does add a little bit of thickness, pushing that optic up a little bit, but that didn't change a whole lot about the way that the gun functioned. Now, unlike the Shadow 2 here, the Legion comes from the factory with a magazine well. You will notice that the magazine well is missing on this particular gun. That is because magazine wells are illegal in the USPSA carry optics division. Therefore, if you get this gun for carry optics, you do have to take that mag well out, basically making it a wasted feature in that box, something that if you were buying this for competition, you didn't really need, so they probably didn't need to throw it in there. Now, the X5 also comes with two recoil springs, one lighter, one a little bit stiffer, for varying ammunition loads, so you can tune the gun. So to go a little bit more in depth in the Shadow 2 here, the Shadow 2 we've got a steel framed gun. It does come with fiber optic sights from the factory. The back sight does get removed when you pull that back cover plate off to put an optic on, basically getting rid of your backup sights. Now, there are options from companies like, I believe, Cajun Gunworks that do have a rear notch in here for a rear sight. You would have to get a taller front sight, but that is an option. Moving down from there, the Shadow 2 is a double action hammer-fired firearm, obviously differing from the P320 striker-fired action. It does have a safety on it, not a decocker, which does give this, from the factory, a smoother trigger than you're going to find in a decocker CZ. Up front here, you've got some nice sharp serrations. Those sharp serrations aid greatly in manipulation of the tiny little CZ slide. That is one common complaint with the CZs. The slide is on the smaller side, which induces some concern about fine motor skills in frantic situations. This is based off of a CZ75, so you do get that small slide, small reciprocating mass, not a small bore axis, unlike is commonly said with CZs. The recoil impulse from the Shadow 2 is nice and straight back. Now, it is not as easy to get onto target as you might think. The Shadow 2, like most CZs, is slightly oversprung. It's made for higher pressure ammunition. So what that means is that upon the slide closing, it's actually going to cause the gun to dip a little bit. There are a lot of different options, but unlike the X5, the Shadow 2 does not come with those options. You will have to get those aftermarket. Now, these are not the stock grips on the Shadow 2. The Shadow 2 comes with stock aluminum grips. They're okay, but they're not as grippy as most shooters like them to be, so most people replace them. These particular ones are from Lock. Around back, you have a competition style square to back hammer. You've got a very nice beaver tail, allowing you to get as tight of a grip on the gun as you want without needing to worry about slide bite too much. As I said, it is based off of a CZ75, so you do get those classic CZ75 ergonomics, making it extremely comfortable in the hand to hold. Up front, again, you do have an accessory rail with a single notch in it. That makes a little bit more sense now that lights are actually legal in carry optics, but it does also give you a nice hefty bit of weight up towards the front of your firearm. Over here on the left-hand side, it does have an extended magazine release. That magazine release does make it significantly easier to reach the mag release for shooters with smaller hands.
Smell like cabbage. Small hands.
The trigger on the Shadow 2 is, let's just say from the factory, it's exceptional. Although CZs get a really good rep for having a good trigger, stock CZs generally don't have that great a trigger. The Shadow 2 does. With slightly reduced trigger pull weights from the factory CZs are sitting around like the 12 to 13 pound mark for the double action. These are closer down to around 10, and single action pulls on a standard CZ of around 5 down to 3 on the Shadow 2. The trigger pull is smooth all the way through with a short, crisp reset, not super audible, but you can feel it, and a short rolling break after that of about 3/16 of an inch to be able to get back on that wall and drop the hammer. I would like the trigger to be a little more crisp, but again, compared to a stock CZ, the Shadow 2 trigger is amazing. Down on the grip, we've got heavy texturing on the front and the back straps, making this a gun that stays planted in your hands. All of these things, the small slide, the weight of 46.5 ounces, the stippling on the grips, gives you a gun that wants to stay planted in your hands and shoot fast. Now let's jump over to the Legion.
I'm on one side. I'm on the other side.
So the Legion is basically the exact opposite of the Shadow 2. The Shadow 2 is a steel frame hammer-fired gun. The Legion is a polymer frame striker-fired gun. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that polymer, though, because you remember this is a weight of 3 ounces less than the Shadow 2. The reason it's 3 ounces less is because this polymer actually has tungsten infused in it, as well as a big old tungsten rod back here in the grip, giving the Legion quite a bit of weight. Now, that weight is more centered around the grip than at the end of the barrel because we don't have that big hunk of steel up here like we do on the Shadow 2. But we do get that weight back, and it is low. The Legion also comes with fiber optic sights. Again, just like the CZ, the rear sight comes off with the optics cover plate. So when you put a new optic on, you do lose that rear sight. Now, with the Romeo 1 Pro here, it does have a rear cut in the dot for it, so you can use the dot as a sort of backup sight. Not the best option, but it is an adequate option. It does work. The X5 is generally a P320. There are upgrades to it. It does have a modified trigger. It is obviously bigger, but as far as general sizing features goes, very similar. It does have Sig's very large slide, which does add slide mass up high, up above the center of gravity, which when firing it, you can feel. The slide reciprocation on the X5 is extremely slow. It moves back very slow and forward very slow. You can actually feel the slide cycling. It does close very softly if you're running the right spring for the ammo that you're running, which allows you to get back on target relatively quickly. However, this gun does jump significantly more than the Shadow 2. This gun in recoil is harsher. You do have a 5-inch barrel, giving you like, 0.11 more barrel out of this. Not going to gain a whole lot from that, but it does make the gun look extremely nice. You got a full dust cover up here in the front, just like with the Shadow 2. This one does give you more mounting options, which again makes more sense now that lights are legal. Moving back from that, we do have slide releases on both the right and the left side, making this a semi-ambidextrous gun. You can swap the magazine release. The Shadow 2 only has the side release on the left-hand side, but the magazine release in that gun is also swappable. So the Legion is a little bit more ambidextrous in that way. Now, the Legion is an X Series P320, which means that for me, the ergonomics are a little bit better in this. However, the ergonomics are not perfect in this. They've got this really weird fat section towards the back of the gun that for me and my medium-sized hands just doesn't fit right. They left some really weird parting lines in here from when they actually created it. Some very squared off lines that I actually had to sand down to get this thing comfortable to hold. And now that I've did that, it is more comfortable, but not as comfortable as the CZ. It is still, however, more comfortable than the standard P320s for me. Now let's talk about my least favorite feature of the Legion here. And that is the trigger. So the trigger in the Legion, again, this is a $1,000 gun. The trigger in the Legion is not competition ready at all in my book. The weight is acceptable. It's a relatively light trigger. I can't test it because I almost immediately replaced it with the Gray Guns trigger. The stock trigger in the Legion is extremely smushy. It's extremely long. And the reset is extremely long as well, leading most shooters that I've seen to short stroke the stock Legion. We had a video come out late 2019, I believe, about carry optics options guns. The Legion was in that video. We had a stock Legion, and every single shooter, we had 4 shooters there, 2 of them masters or grandmasters in USPSA. Every single shooter short stroked the Legion trigger. That's how long the reset was on it. For what you're paying for a Legion, I don't think that that trigger is an acceptable thing. Honestly, the trigger in my X Compact was better than my Legion trigger. Upgrade that for something like the Gray Guns trigger, and you are going to do better, but you're still not going to get something like a really nice Glock trigger, anywhere close to a CZ P10 or a Walther PDP trigger, and you're not even going to be in the same ballpark as a hammer-fired gun. Working down from that, the ergonomics of the grip itself are rather nice. They fit my medium hands very nicely. However, for shooters with larger hands, the X5 does not have replaceable back straps, so you are stuck with one grip size with these, making them a little bit less universal. With the CZ, although it doesn't have back strap, you can swap out the grip panels, giving you things like palm swell availability, which is going to fill a larger hand a little bit better. The magazine release on the X5 is actually in a really good spot. I always had a really easy time dropping the magazines on the X5, and oddly enough, I also have an easier time loading the magazines on the X5. You can see here, between the two of them, the X5 actually has a slight flare to the magwell at the bottom.
We need to talk about your flare.
The CZ does not, so you've got to be a lot more sure and a lot more solid with those mag changes with the CZ75. That being said, the CZ does tend to drop mags a little bit more consistently because you're not getting that friction on the polymer like you are with the X5. But if you run a heavy enough base pad with the X5, doesn't really make that much of a difference. So let's talk a little bit about shooting these two guns. I've shot competitions with both of them. I've put in a lot more time with the Shadow 2 since my last competition now, and in shooting, I greatly prefer the Shadow 2. There's a lot of stuff about the gun that just works better for me. I like the trigger more. I think that it recoils better. The oversprung does get to me a little bit, so I do have springs on the way for those, but those replacement springs are like $6. The smoothness of the recoil is not something that $6 is going to fix on the Sig. But again, remember, the Sig is $500 less than the Shadow 2. Not only that, but the Sig, you're gonna probably have wear items wear out less than in the CZ. As much as I like them, there are a couple of things about CZ that they really should have fixed by now. One of those things, particularly on the Shadow 2, is the trigger return spring. The trigger return spring on those is prone to failure. They have improved it, so it's better than it used to be, but they need to completely change the design to a compression or a tensile spring rather than the spring style that they use. I just like shooting the CZ a little bit more in competition. It is a little bit heavier of a gun, which makes it recoil better. It just feels better to shoot the CZ. Time will tell if I can shoot it as well. I'm still getting used to it, but I'll tell you, I don't really have any want to go back to the Legion. Now, what does that mean for you? Well, it means that you've got two really good options with a $500 price difference. And which option you're going to pick has everything to do with how much money you want to spend and how serious you want to be about this particular sport, or just about the gun itself. For me, taking price out of the equation completely, the CZ is not only the better competitive gun, but it's also the cooler gun to have in your collection. The Legion, although a good gun, doesn't have quite the flair that the CZ does. But it's really hard to throw a $500 price discrepancy out of that equation. So if you're looking for a production or carry optics ready firearm and money isn't really an option, go with the CZ. But if that $500 is a matter of you having enough ammo to be able to compete, you will be able to get by with the X5. But do expect to spend a little bit on those aftermarket components, like a new trigger. The trigger on the X5 also, not that easy to replace. It's not like a Glock, but it's also nowhere near as complicated as a CZ. So thanks for watching, guys, our comparison of the CZ Shadow 2 versus the Sig P320 X5 Legion. If you've got one or both of those guns and you've got some input, go ahead and write those down in the comments below. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you like what we do here on the channel and you want to see more of this, go ahead and hit that subscribe and the notification bell. Head over to workthetrigger.com. Over there you'll find coupon codes, affiliate links, and our apparel. Thanks, guys. Remember, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.